What is up, shredders? Today I'm here to talk to you about the Bladerunner bridge down here. This is probably the absolute best trem I have ever used in my entire life, and I'll tell you exactly why. This thing dive bombs, it does all the crazy effects you need it to, and it stays in tune. For the longest time I was a huge Floyd Rose fan. I have a big love-hate relationship with that whole bridge system in general. The thing is, I love the crazy effects it has. I love the dive bombs. I love the crazy Eddie Van Halen whammy tricks you can do. But the thing is, if you do not have a German licensed original Floyd Rose with hardened steel, and your pivots aren't hardened steel, you're eventually going to wear out your Floyd Rose, and it's never going to stay in tune again. And sadly, this is what I kept coming into with the Floyd Rose so many times, and so I thought, you know what, there's got to be a better alternative out there. And so I decided to buy the Bladerunner bridge because it just stays in tune and it does all of the effects I really want it to. And the secret behind the Bladerunner bridge is that it has a tempered steel blade in it that always returns to the 0 point, and it's virtually frictionless when you go to play with it. And so anytime you go to do any crazy dive bombs or any crazy upward or downward slants, whatever that is, upward and downward actions with your whammy bar, you're going to return to 0 and in tune every single time. And that especially compounds itself when you add locking tuners into the equation. And I've been a huge fan of locking tuners for a long time. And the thing is, locking tuners and the Bladerunner bridge, you're virtually going to never go out of tune with this thing. And I think it's a great combination. If you have regular tuners and you're using the Bladerunner bridge, you're probably going to stay in tune better than you would with a standard Fender Stratocaster trem system. But overall, I would highly suggest getting locking tuners on this baby, on your guitar, so that you stay in tune no matter what. And that's extremely key, especially when you play with a band. I remember giving up on the Floyd Rose for a long time because I was a part of a band, and being a part of a band means you need to stay in tune. Floyd Rose, man, when you go out of tune live, it's probably the worst thing ever created. Fixed bridge is definitely your friend, except unless you have the Bladerunner bridge here, which virtually always stays in tune for you. This trem system also fits standard Stratocaster bodies extremely well, or just anything that uses somewhat of a standard trem. You can just throw this into almost any guitar that uses standard trem, and it's going to be the easiest installation possible. As if you could see, it's just basically a couple screws in here and then your standard Stratocaster back here. It's nothing really too complicated. On top of that, the bar itself feels extremely well. It feels more like a Floyd Rose bar than it does a standard Stratocaster bar, which I really like. It has a more of a elongated feel to it. And when you add in the ring lock kit that you are offered when you buy this thing, it virtually doesn't move whatsoever, which is really nice. It's also easy to change the strings with and to set up more or less. Floyd Roses can be a huge nightmare when it comes to setting up. This thing is basically just like your standard Stratocaster trem system. You just have to basically throw it in there, put your strings on, tune it up, and then adjust the screws here according to how much tension you have. It's really not a huge nightmare whatsoever, which is something I really like about it. On top of that, if you do break a string, it's really easy to just throw off your string and throw a new one on there. It's not a huge pain in the butt like a Floyd Rose. This thing also flutters extremely easily. First time I heard the flutter was a Steve Vai song, and I thought it was the coolest sound in the world. And that's what happens when you push back on your trem system here and then slightly get off of it, and it has that spring type bouncing effect to it. This thing always flutters no matter what. You could probably put a mag lock on it if you do not want it to flutter as much, but personally for me, I love the flutter. I'm more of a lead guy than a rhythm guy, and just getting it to flutter is so paramount for me. I remember back in the day when I had multiple different types of trem systems. In order to get them to flutter, you really had to set them up extremely well. This thing, however bad you set this thing up, it's still fluttering, you know. This is set up pretty well right now, but even at its worst setup, it still flutters, which is great if you're a big flutter fan. Okay, for the two bad things about this trem system is that you can't completely flop the strings. Usually on a Floyd Rose, you can get everything to be just floppy when you dive down all the way. You can't really get that effect. You can get somewhat of it. It's closer to a standard Stratocaster trem flop, more or less. On top of that, you also can't stretch as far up as you really want to with a Floyd, especially with a recessed Floyd. This thing can go up a couple steps, but you're really not getting that full reach. For me personally, I'm more of a dive bomb type of guy than I am raising of the trem. I like the flutter, but I really don't use it a whole lot. And so if you're really just a big Eddie Van Halen type of Floyd Rose guy, you're really gonna love this trem system. But if you're more of a Steve Vai, Dimebag Darrell type of guy, you're going to find it a bit more limited, especially when it comes to racing the pitches or not. You can compromise that with a whammy pedal, but overall I really like this trem, and it does the two things I want it to do the most: dive bomb and stay in tune. And so if you're a fan of staying in tune and dive bombing, I would highly suggest the Bladerunner Bridge. It is totally worth the money. Having gone through so many trem systems over the years, this just saves me a ridiculous amount of money than trying more and more trems that just do not work and wear out. So enough talk, let's hear this thing in action. Let's try to break these strings, try to dive bomb the crap out of them. It's highly possible, since these are 8s, probably the lightest strings you can get, but we'll see what happens. you enjoyed this video and you want to see more gear reviews like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below, and I'll see you next time. I gotta pee. Got to pee.